الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Let the Quran Speak. My name is Sophia, I'm your host. A new study shows that as an individual's wealth rises, so too does the tendency to lie and cheat. What is the relationship between unethical behavior and wealth? We'll be looking at that a little bit later. And how might one avoid the dangerous effects of having too much wealth? Later in the show, we also feature an interview with Tayyaba Taylor, the founder and editor-in-chief of Aziza magazine. And finally, we end with a question and answer period. Questions from you, answers from us. With me is Brother Shabir Ali from the Islamic Information Center. Brother Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Pleasure to be on.
Now, let's look at this study about wealth and about the dangerous effects of wealth. Very interesting research about what wealth does to an individual. For example, they found that individuals who are wealthier while driving were ruder to other drivers and were ruder to other passengers, other pedestrians, I guess, willing to cut through, make rude gestures, that sort of thing.
Yes, one of the things that did come out of the study, and I believe we should make that clear from the very start, is that it is not true to say that wealthy persons are necessarily more rude or more lying or cheating and stealing than non-wealthy people. But the study did show that there seems to be a sort of predisposition among such persons. In other words, the wealth seems to predispose a person towards some of the negative traits that you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think wealth causes that sort of behavior or that predisposition, as you mentioned?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I think it'd be important for us to talk about how the study was sort of established. How did this come to be established?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, some of the experiments, you've described one of the experiments. It was found that people, stopping at an intersection would be more likely to be rude to others or to cut people off or not necessarily be so polite to others if they happen to be surrounded by the glamour of good things. Another study was conducted with the same objective of trying to find out whether or not wealth does predispose a person towards some sort of lying or cheating or stealing. People were contacted and asked to report the results of a random toss of dice appearing on their computer screen. And they were not told that, in fact, the dice were not being thrown at random. It was always programmed to come out 12. So there were 3 dice thrown, and the total will always be 12. But some people reported that they were seeing 15.
Yes.
And it was found that those who did report the higher number
were the wealthier individuals.
Yes. So another experiment was done where people were given a jar of candy and told that this jar of candy is going to now, once it leaves you, it's going to children in the other room. And it was found that the wealthier persons were more likely to take a candy from the jar before it goes to, and this seems like a humorous sort of example, but these experiments and others in the same vein.
There was another one where a person would give $10 and then they would get change back for 20.
Exactly.
So the experimenters tried to find out, would they report it back to the individual giving them the money?
True, and it was found that the poorer persons tended to be honest and say, look,
Yes.
I only gave you $10.
Or to be more honest.
Yes, exactly. Whereas the wealthier persons tended to take the extra change as though they rightfully deserved it. So now back to your question. If this is the study...
what causes it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, no one knows for sure, but some of the psychologists involved with this and analyzing this study I think that it may be because the wealthier persons feel a certain sense of entitlement. Maybe it's because they already have like so much and and they become accustomed to owning things, and they don't want it to be taken away.
Maybe they feel that they deserve it.
Yes, we can add to this that sometimes in order to acquire wealth, one may fall into a trap of being less than honest. And we find this in newspaper advertisements and in TV ads all of the time, that the child learns from a very young age that you see the large transformer figures and whatever trucks and so on being advertised as being in your cereal box, and then you buy the cereal, the box of cereal, and you realize it's very tiny compared to what they were showing in the ads, and so there is a sort of deviousness that is built into modern advertising methods. People find ways and loopholes around the laws so that they can appear to be complying, and sometimes they openly flout whatever regulations are there to get away with it, knowing that in the end they will just be slapped with a $2,000 fine or whatever, a minimal fine, compared with the huge profits they will rake in if they use false advertising. So sometimes people get accustomed to being dishonest, and by so doing, earning a buck, and wealth might develop in this way. Again, we're not saying that all wealthy people are bad, all non-wealthy people are good, but we're saying that there is a certain tendency there that one has to beware of.
Do you think wealth in some way insulates an individual from the consequences of their actions or their negative actions?
No, and it should not. In the Islamic tradition, we are taught that people are to be treated fairly. Some of the Islamic penalties, as you know, can be quite severe in response to certain crimes. And in classical times, when this was applied, for example, in the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, a certain Fatima, a woman named Fatima, was brought before the Prophet for judgment. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that if my own daughter Fatima was before me, I would apply the same judgment. So he was making it quite clear that this is not going to be done on the basis of favoritism. It doesn't matter if you're close to the Prophet by family ties or distant from him. It doesn't matter if you're wealthy or poor. You're all going to have the same treatment. In fact, the Quran itself, when it speaks about standing up for justice in Surah 4, verse 129, it says, even if kana ghaniyan aw fakhiran, whether the person is rich or poor, you have to stand up for justice with regards to that person in the same way.
Now, let's say there's an individual who's wealthy, naturally wealthy perhaps, or perhaps has earned wealth in some way. How do they avoid the negative effects of being wealthy?
Well,
so that they don't fall into unethical behavior.
First of all, we should show that this is possible. In fact, the Quran does not condemn wealth per se, as if wealth is a bad thing. On the contrary, the Quran praises wealth as a gift from God, something to be treasured and to be enjoyed and so on. And there have been some very wealthy Muslims who were good Muslims. The third Caliph Uthman was known for his wealth prior to his becoming a Caliph. Of course, he wouldn't profit from being a Caliph. He wouldn't become wealthy by being the Caliph, because the Caliph is by definition a servant of the people. But he was wealthy before that, and he was known as Uthman al-Ghani, the wealthy Uthman. A certain companion of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Abdurrahman bin Auf, had left everything he owned in Mecca and migrated along with the Muslims when they were driven out from Mecca, when they could not practice their religion peacefully there. So they went to find a new home in Medina, and there he was penniless. But he said, show me the way to the marketplace, because he didn't want to accept charity from others. And he began buying and selling and trading, and eventually he became rich. So, and he's respected as one of the best Muslims of his time. And
so there were individuals even in the time of the Prophet who were wealthy,
exactly,
but also good Muslims at the same time.
It's true, and this is possible. So your question is, how can we avoid the negatives? Well, one way is to be freed from this avarice, the desire and the greed to obtain more. And so the Quran says, وَمَا يُوكَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Whoever is saved from his own avarice, is the successful one. So how to be saved from that avarice? First of all, to turn our love to God rather than to the wealth. We have got everything mixed up. We're supposed to love people and use things, but we end up loving things and using people. So we have to turn our attention to first of all love God, and then to love all of the creatures of God, all living beings, especially human beings. And so the material objects that we try to acquire now become secondary to the love of God and to the love of people. And so we cannot be stepping on the toes of people in order to reach for higher gains in this world of the material things. So that's the way of overcoming this.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Brother Shabir.
You're welcome.
We'll take a break. When we return, we feature an interview with Tayyiba Taylor, the founder and editor-in-chief of Aziza magazine.